What is up, Rad Potential YouTube, and welcome to today's Radformational video on first gen RX7s and everything you need to know about buying one of these cars. So, first thing we're going to start off with, years of production and then the differences in the bodies, okay? 78 to 80 is what's called an SA RX7. The SA comes from the first two letters in the VIN. Biggest difference is steel bumpers, and the back of the car has the license plate on the sail panel like this, just like that, versus the FB, which came out in 1981. The tail section looks like this and has these nice molded bumpers. So what does the SA RX7 get you? Well, all the models came with a 12A. You could get a 5-speed or an automatic. They were all 4x110 wheel pattern, which is the small bearing wheel pattern, and they were all drum brakes with an open diff. Now, you may ask, but the one that I'm buying has a limited slip differential in the back. It's a common swap. You can switch a lot of these differentials out between all the cars fairly easily. I have a video on that. I will link it in the description. Go watch it if you have limited slip or you're in questions. So, moving on to the engine stuff. The 78 to 80 cars had a different carburetor. It's called a Nicky. And they all had Nickies, but they're different. So the emission system's super simple. It has what's called a thermal reactor on the side of the engine versus like a collector with catalytic converters underneath it. And in general, the engine bay is just a lot less hectic than a newer one. So, for example, this is a 79. Now you may think this looks pretty hectic, but that's a very simple vacuum setup. That's pretty easy. From the factory, Mazda did not put AC on these, however there were dealer installed air conditioning options, and if you have a dealer installed air conditioning option, it might be different from somebody else's, so nothing's really super standard on that. 78 to 80 sunroofs are all different throughout the years. So 79 has this funky pin style, which looks like that. You can see the pins and the little lever flip up. A 1980 RX7 has the twist knob like the FBs, and then you may find an assorted amount of dealer installed sunroofs that could be glass, oval, circle, bubble, you name it. They probably put it in there. It was the 80s. Okay, the interiors of the 79 to 80s. I'll show you my silver car right here. Yes, I do have a cage and a steering wheel, but you'll get the gist of what these look like. You're going to see all the gauges are on the left. The center console has a very simple look to it. It is not integrated with the dash. You can split this whole thing right here. The bottom side comes off, top side comes off. These are later model door panels, but the SA cars had a flat cardboard door panel with these handles on it. This was just a piece that was bolted to it. And these are also FB seats. So let's hop over here to this black car again and I'll show you the true SA stuff. Alright, so moving on to the interior of the 78 to 80, you're going to see the dash has all of its gauges on the left, like my silver car. You're going to see the center console is much simpler. 4-bar steering wheel. If you're lucky, you got a 2-bar. Here's your SA door panel. Basically, it's a piece of cardboard, a little bit of metal trim at the top. You had a 2-line and a 1-line interior, which was a dealer option. There you could get the stripes were different. I think it got you like fancier seats and stuff too, but I'm not entirely sure. These are your typical SA seat. Some of them are all leather. They're very flat, very uncomfortable. So, also, doors creak. So, moving on to the 81 to 83 cars. So, these are kind of a weird one for me because I don't own one. Alright, so, but the things you need to know. One, all of them are small bearing. What that means is the wheel bearings are the smaller ones versus, and I'll get to when the bigger ones come in, but they're the same as an SA size wheel bearing, brake hub, the whole deal. In 82, they came out with what's called a GSL model. The GSL got you a limited slip rear differential. However, the wheel pattern is still 4x110. So, small wheel pattern. The GSLs, regular GS, everything, all came with the 12A. The Nikkei carburetor had some more emission stuff on it. The interior has the same dash as an SA, but the center console is a little bit different, and the seats are going to look like the seats in my silver car, which you already saw, or will kind of look like these seats, a little bit fancier. So throughout these years, some of the options were kind of weird. You could get wipers on them, cruise control options, different radio options, stuff like that. So you may get a variation of the sorts in that. Those, just all center consoles on RX7s are prone to cracking to pieces. So if they're cracked, somebody's been in there and hacked them up, just so you know. Now, moving on to the 84 and 85 cars. Now this is where we get into what's called the big bearing suspension. Big bearing suspension, they switched to a larger wheel bearing front and rear. Now your GS and GSL models are still present. Those are still 4x110 wheel pattern, which is the small wheel pattern, but they are big wheel bearing, so it's different. You can't take a hub off the newer one and put it on the old one. But the interior is where the biggest changes happen. So 84, 85 changed the interior to basically look like this. So you can see the dash and the center console are all one piece. The steering wheels are all different like this now. You've got the only rotary car, I think, to not have a center mounted tack. The tachometer's off to the side. This off to the side here. Even in an FC, the tack's in the center. As you can see, they like to crack. They got a clock here. You now have a button style AC controls. I think some of the earlier or your base model ones still had a cable style. Fancier looking glove box that stays shut a lot better. The door panels are a little bit different on the newer ones, which this is a GS LSE. So transitioning into that, the GS and the GSL cars in 84, 85 had a 12A, but you could get a GS LSE, which has a 13B fuel injected engine like such. So as you can see, the emissions substantially more complex on one of these units. You got stuff running all over the place, vacuum lines going everywhere. They did have a Mazda factory AC option on these, so these were not a dealer installed AC system, so you will see some consistency in the AC on these later models. The GS LSE cars got you 4x114 wheel bolt pattern, 4-wheel disc brakes, and a 4x110 rear axle ratio. Every RX7 besides the GS LSE has a 3.9. If it's an automatic car, I don't know off the top of my head what that rear axle ratio is, but I think it's the same. But these had a 410, and then they also had vented discs in the rear. So the big thing to tell if you have a GS LSE rear axle, is the rotor a solid rotor or is the rotor vented, i.e. is there slots in the middle of it? That's the biggest way to tell. Also, the drive shaft flange is huge on a GS LSE. So, now, we'll just go for the rust points real quick. Places that these cars rust. Now, you're going to hear the term bin rot get thrown around. If you have a later model car, i.e. an 81 to 85, you have in the back, behind the seats, storage bins. Behind those storage bins, and behind the rear wheel, just like this, you're going to get rust right here and all up through here. Now, you'll see it more prevalent on northern cars because these plates are spot welded in and you'll get moisture in behind them. You can see spot welds around, moisture in. This is your upper control arm mount. And yes, if this is bad, you can rip that off doing dumb stuff in your car. The other place that you may see rust on these is the floors. Now, generally floor rust comes from water leaking into the car and sitting in the carpet and chewing through it all. So, water will generally leak into these cars. If your sunroof seals are bad, there's a drain right here that drains out this vent, and there's a drain on the other side that drains out the other vent. Another place, your trunk well, the spare tire area will rust. There's a drain in here, underneath this, and a drain underneath this. They come out. Right up under here, there should be a little rubber hose sticking down. You can find them commonly. You will find them disconnected right underneath this window. So be aware of that. Both of those are easy places you can crawl into the car and see. If your car's been sitting for a long time, I mean, it is a 40-year-old car, the gas tanks tend to rust. Bad fuel, etc. is a common killer of these if you're trying to find one for a project. As far as other common failure points, if you're looking at an RX7, you know about a rotary engine, at least a little bit. If you don't know anything about a rotary engine, I suggest hop on YouTube, find some other videos. There's plenty on my channel. Learn a little bit about them, learn how they work. Because most shops, like general auto service repair shops, will not work on one of these cars. And if they will, they're going to charge you out the wazoo for it. So try to find somebody local. There's some rotary shops around that'll help you out if you need to get your engine rebuilt, if you think that's the issue. Most of the time you'll find that these cars got parked because of some small issue, and then some shop told the owner that they needed a full engine rebuild to fix it, whenever it really might have just been a fuel pump or a bad carburetor or something like that. So that kind of sums up everything you need to know about the RX-7s in one little video. So I'm kind of gonna leave this for those who are looking at one for sale. There's tons of cool stuff you can do with these cars. They are fantastic driving and handling cars. They're not the fastest. A Miata will outperform one of these, but when you go to an autocross or you go to a car show, you ideally get more attention than the 50 other Miatas that are there. So take that all for what it's worth. You can go back on here, find a ton more detailed information on these. I've done a lot of stuff with them. There's little variances here and there between them, like the 1980, if you look, there's 2 black marks on that bumper that go down. The 78 to 79s didn't have that, so you can see, like this one here, the bumper is black, but this one does not have those little rubber pieces on the bumper, you know, little thing like that. As far as the FBs, some of them got like old school mirrors, which that has the new style mirrors on it. Some of them, like your non-power mirrors, were non-power at the base. Some of them were non-power, you move the middle thing. There's just a lot of funky options. I mean, you can get all sorts of different colors interiors. You know, this GSLC is red, etc. There's cloth and leather versions. So on a leather, this would be leather. Insert here, the seats would be leather, etc. Yeah, I mean, you can usually tell with good common sense when you're buying a car that that it's junk or not. So, but yeah, typical rust spots, bin rot, floors, trunk, normal stuff. The hoods, I've seen some start to separate just with condensation on the back of them. The frames will start to separate. Parts for these cars. So, parts are getting harder to find. And by that, I don't mean fenders, and I don't mean transmissions, and I don't mean like your typical body parts, because everybody that has an RX-7 probably has 2 or 3 parts cars laying around, as you can see here. What I do mean is that key parts are getting hard to find. They don't reproduce a lot of nicky carburetor parts to put your stock carburetor back together. So a lot of people switch to Weber's, Holley's, stuff like that. They don't reproduce 12A engine parts. So finding a 12A housing is pretty hard. There's companies that machine 13B housings down to 12A size, but that stuff's expensive, so you'll have to kind of figure it out. You'll see a lot of these old cars have chrome flake on the engines. If they lose compression, they're usually pretty chattered up, and that's just, it just sucks when you pull one apart and you can't rebuild it because the engine parts are junk. So things to keep in mind: there are backyard people, you know, me included, that'll dump a bunch of Marvel Mystery Oil in there, let it sit, the locked up motor will free up, and then it might run, but it's a pot shot. So about the time that this video is going out, we'll say like your general valuing of, we'll say, a car, I would personally say a good condition SA car, so 78 to 80, may be worth, like if it's nice condition but not running, anywhere from, you know, $800 to $1,500 maybe. Same thing with your standard FB 12A cars. I would say they're worth less than an SA to me, so between maybe $500 to $1,200. GSLSEs fetch good money because the suspension parts are worth a bunch of money. Everybody wants those brakes, everybody wants the front spindles, so those generally fetch, you know, over $1,000 for parts cars, even now if they're mostly complete. Any car that's running and driving, in my opinion, is worth $2,000 or more, just because you can't find one they're hard to find that are running. So, and then go up from there. You can hop on Bring a Trailer, find them for 12 grand. You can hop on Bring a Trailer, find high mile ones that sold for 4 grand. So, kind of do your research and figure it out. Then again, this isn't a Mazda RX-7 how much is it worth video. This is what you should look for and the things you should know about them. So, hopefully that helps. It's just a quick video to film around here. If you like RX-7 content, want to follow along with the stuff we do here at the Rad Ranch, we do have a ton of RX-7s. I think there's 8 of them that I can see right now. And yeah, give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a share if you think the information helped you. And we will see you on the next one. Keep it rad.